There's a dark and a troubled side of life. There's a bright and a sunny side too. Though we meet with the darkness and strife, the sunny side we also may view. Keep on the sunny side, always on the sunny side. Keep on the sunny side of life. It will help us every day, it will brighten all the way if we keep on the sunny side of life. Though the storm in its fury break today, crushing hopes that we cherish so dear, storm and cloud will in time pass away. The sun again will shine bright and clear. Keep on the sunny side, always on the sunny side. Keep on the sunny side of life. It will help us every day, it will brighten all the way if we keep on the sunny side of life. Let us greet with a song of hope each day. Though the moment be cloudy or fair, let us trust in the Savior alway, who keepeth everyone in his care. Keep on the sunny side, always on the sunny side. Keep on the sunny side of life. It will help us every day, it will brighten all the way if we keep on the sunny side of life. If we keep on the sunny side of life. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, or good evening as the case may be. That was Keep on the Sunny Side, written by Ada Blankhorn and J. Howard Entwistle in 1899, originally recorded by the Carter family in 1928. It seemed like a fitting way to welcome you to the virtual Sachem Public Library and to Tennessee Walt's Bristol and Beyond, the birth of country music. I am Tennessee Walt. All you really need to know about me is that my name is not Walt and I'm not from Tennessee. Also, I sing classic country music. But what is country music? What is it, and where did it come from? Well, of course, in a certain sense, there's been country music for as long as there have been country people to play it or sing it. But the commercial genre that we call country music, the art form practiced by Hank Williams, Johnny Cash, Dolly Parton, Reba McEntire, Faith Hill, Luke Bryan, that has a very specific origin in a very specific time and place. It dates from the so-called Bristol Sessions of 1927, also known as the Big Bang of country music. No less an authority than Johnny Cash called the Bristol Sessions, quote, the single most important event in the history of country music. And he should know. So, the year was 1927. In late July, a man named Ralph Peer turned up in Bristol, which is a small city that straddles the border between Tennessee and Virginia. Nobody knew who he was or what he was doing there. They found out the next day when he placed an advertisement in the local newspaper. Peer was with the Victor Talking Machine Company, one of the early record labels, and he was touring the South looking for traditional music which might have potential on records. His advertisement invited local musicians to come in and audition, and over the course of the next 12 days, from July 25th to August 5th, 1927, 19 different solo and group acts passed their audition and recorded for Peer at his makeshift studio in the Taylor Christian Hat Company building. Now, most of those acts were not going to be of any historic significance, but two of them would become immortals. A 29-year-old singer named Jimmy Rogers and a vocal trio called the Carter family. Both were signed to Victor contracts and by the end of the next year were among the biggest names in American popular music. They would go on to define the poles between which country music has orbited ever since. In fact, if you're looking for a working definition of country music, one possibility would be this. If it's anywhere on the continuum between Jimmy Rogers and the Carter family, then it's country. If it isn't, it ain't. Now, country music as we know it today is the result of the fusion of two earlier forms, mountain ballads and the blues. Now, mountain ballads dates from no later than the 16th century in northern England and Scotland, and included not only original songs but also folk versions of classic hymns and Victorian parlor ballads. The blues is an African American form rooted in the Deep South and drawing on African music. The Carter family was and is the mainstay of the mountain ballad tradition. They were from Macy's Spring, Virginia, which is just as small as it sounds, and they really were a family. A.P. Carter and Sarah Carter were married, and 18-year-old Maybelle Carter was not only married to A.P.'s brother, she actually came to Bristol 7 months pregnant with their first child, but also was Sarah's first cousin. Sarah was the lead singer, right, with a husky baritone, which was strangely compelling in person and even more so on recordings. And she also played the auto harp. A.P. contributed the songs and the bass harmonies, and Maybelle provided the alto harmonies and also was the lead guitarist. She would in time become the single most important guitarist in the history of American popular music, with her famous Carter Scratch influencing everybody from Chet Atkins and Willie Nelson to George Harrison, Eric Clapton, and Joe Perry. Now, Ralph Peers saw gold in the Carters right from the start. Most of the acts that recorded for him at Bristol recorded only 2 songs, enough for a double-sided record. The Carters recorded 6 songs. This is the first of them, adapted by A.P. Carter from an old folk song. My heart is sad and I'm in sorrow for the only one I love. When shall I see him more? Oh, never till we meet in heaven above. Oh, bury me under the weeping willow, yes, under the weeping willow tree, so he may know where I am sleeping and perhaps he'll weep for me. When he told me that he did not love me, I could not believe it was true, until an angel softly whispered, he is proving untrue to you. Oh, bury me under the weeping willow, yes, under the weeping willow tree, so he may know where I am sleeping and perhaps he'll weep for me. Tomorrow was our wedding day, but oh where is he? He's gone to seek another bride, and he cares no more for me. Oh, bury me under the weeping willow, yes, under the weeping willow tree, so he may know where I am sleeping, and perhaps he'll weep for me. And perhaps he'll weep for me. The Carter family would be a pivotal force in the evolution not only of country music, but also of folk and gospel music. They remained top recording artists until 1941, when Sarah's divorce and subsequent remarriage finally put an end to the act. They left Bristol on August 4th, the same day that Peer had his first session with Jimmy Rogers. Now, Rogers recorded only 2 songs, but that was enough for a double-sided disc, a dinner platter disc as they were known in those days, and it became one of the hits of the Bristol sessions. Rogers had been born in 1897 in Meridian, Mississippi, where he grew up steeped in the African-American music of the Mississippi Delta. He had done some railroad work, as his father had before him, but mainly he was interested in show business, and especially in singing. He actually came to Bristol as the vocalist for a quintet called the Teneva Ramblers, Unfortunately, the night before their audition, he and his partners argued over which songs they ought to perform. Argued to such an extent that the next day the Ramblers auditioned as a quartet and Rodgers as a solo artist. This is the first song he ever sang for Ralph Peer on August 4th, 1927. Once I had a sweetheart brave and true. His hair was dark and curly, his loving eyes were blue. He told me that he loved me, and he often proved it so. He often came to see me when the evening sun was low. But fate took him away to this awful German war. I saw him off and wondered if I ever would see him more. He said, "Goodbye, little darling, to France I must go. And if I ever come home again, none but God can know." He took a golden finger ring and placed it on my hand. Said, "Remember me, little darling, when I'm in no man's land." He told me he would write to me, this promise he kept too. The first he sent me ended, I pray this war is through. The second one he sent me, the war was just ahead. The third was from his captain, my darling Bill was dead. I keep all his letters, I'll keep his gold ring too, and I'll always live a single life for the soldier who was so true. Jimmie Rodgers and the Carter family were very different people, both in style and in substance. Now, Rodgers was a drinker, a smoker, and a strutting peacock who loved expensive suits, fancy cars, beautiful women, and elegant living. The Carters were abstemious, hard-working, stay-at-home folk who would show up for a concert or a recording session wearing the same clothes they wore the rest of the time. The Carters were church-going people who recorded numerous religious songs, while Rodgers' 108 recorded songs include only one that mentions Jesus, a duet with the Carter family. Their signature song was Maybelle's agile but never showy guitar playing. His was a bright, reverberant yodel that left no doubt that you were dealing with a Jimmie Rodgers song. They were very different people, in short, and while they did do one recording session together, they traveled in very different circles. Ralph Peer and his wife were the only acquaintances they had in common. Johnny Cash, who was a Jimmie Rodgers devotee, once asked his mother-in-law, Maybelle Carter, what it had been like working with Rodgers. She ducked the question, he recalled, and he got the impression that she hadn't cared for Rodgers. This contrast comes through crystal clear in their signature songs. The Carters was originally recorded in 1935 and had been adapted by A.P. Carter from a 1907 hymn by Ada R. Habershon and Charles H. Gabriel. It has subsequently become the unofficial national anthem of country music. was standing by the window on one cold and cloudy day, and I saw the hearse come rolling for to carry my mother away. Can the circle be unbroken by and by, Lord, by and by? There's a better home awaiting in the sky, Lord, in the sky. Lord, I told the undertaker, undertaker, please drive slow. For this body you are hauling, Lord, I hate to see her go. Can the circle be unbroken by and by, Lord, by and by? There's a better home awaiting in the sky, Lord, in the sky. I followed close behind her, tried to hold up and be brave, but I could not hide my sorrow when they laid her in that grave. Can the circle be unbroken by and by, Lord, by and by? There's a better home awaiting in the sky, Lord, in the sky. Went back home, Lord, my home was lonesome. Missed my mother, she was gone. All my brothers, sisters crying, never was a home so lone. Can the circle be unbroken by and by, Lord, by and by? There's a better home awaiting in the sky, Lord, in the sky. In the sky, Lord, in the sky. The first recording session after Bristol for either Jimmie Rodgers or the Carter family brought Rodgers to Camden, New Jersey in November 1927. It included this song, which was released in February 1928 and became a nationwide sensation. It made a star out of Jimmie Rodgers and, more than any other single song, made country music what it is today. T for Texas, T for Tennessee, oh, T for Texas, T for Tennessee. T for Thelma, the gal that made a wreck out of me. If you don't want me, mama, you sure don't have to stall. If you don't want me, you don't have to stall. 'Cause I can get more women than a passenger train can haul. Gonna get me a shotgun long as I am tall. Gonna get me a shotgun long as I am tall. Gonna shoot poor Thelma just to see her jump and fall. Gonna go where the water tastes like cherry wine. Gonna go where the water tastes like cherry wine. 'Cause this Georgia water tastes like turpentine. Gonna get me a pistol with a big bright shiny bell. Gonna get me a pistol with a big bright shiny bell. Gonna shoot that rounder that stole away my gal. Rather drink muddy water, sleep in a hollow log. Rather drink muddy water, sleep in a hollow log, than to be in Atlanta, treated like a dirty dog. T for Texas, T for Tennessee. Oh, T for Texas, T for Tennessee. T for Thelma, the gal that made a wreck out of me. Now, it's easy to focus on the contrast between Jimmie Rodgers and the Carter family, but the group known as the first family of country music and the man known as the father of country music had important elements in common. One of them was sincerity. In American popular music, then as now, whether you're talking about that era's Tin Pan Alley, Broadway, and swing, or modern pop and rock and roll, American popular music almost always comes with a tinge of irony. Cole Porter, Johnny Mercer, or George and Ira Gershwin might write a song about true love, but almost certainly it would have a slightly tongue-in-cheek feeling. The wordplay too clever, the imagery too facile. Now, country singers have never been afraid to wear their hearts on their sleeves, to admit to intense emotion and defy the sophisticates to scoff. From the Carters to Hank Williams, from Willie Nelson to Taylor Swift, country has never been ashamed of sincere emotion and authentic simplicity. This 1930 hit for the Carter family was adapted by A.P. Carter from an old folk song. It takes a worried man to sing a worried song. It takes a worried man to sing a worried song. I'm worried now, but I won't be worried long. I went across the river and laid me down to sleep. I went across the river and laid me down to sleep. When I woke up, there were shackles on my feet. 29 links of chain around my leg. 29 links of chain around my leg. And on each link, an initial of my name. It takes a worried man to sing a worried song. It takes a worried man to sing a worried song. I'm worried now, but I won't be worried long. I asked the judge what might be my fine. I asked the judge what might be my fine. 21 years on the RC mountain line. The train I ride is 16 coaches long. The train I ride is 16 coaches long. The girl I love is on that train and gone. It takes a worried man to sing a worried song. It takes a worried man to sing a worried song. I'm worried now, but I won't be worried long. If anyone should ask you who composed this song, if anyone should ask you who composed this song, tell them 'twas I, and I sing it all day long. Oh, it takes a worried man to sing a worried song. It takes a worried man to sing a worried song. I'm worried now, but I won't be worried long. Now, Jimmie Rodgers may not have been as sincere in his music as the Carter family. In fact, that's one of the elements of the continuum between him and them. But he was capable of setting aside his yodeling and his preening if the song called for it, especially if it was about his native state. I've heard all about the tune that's called the Alabama Moon, but the Mississippi Moon is just as bright. And I can't forget the time when I asked you to be mine while the moon was smiling on that happy night. And you promised me then that you'd wed me in June. That's why I love the Mississippi Moon. Oh, the Mississippi Moon is shining down tonight, and love just seems to fill the air. The whippoorwills are flitting in its mellow light and calling to the lovers there. Let us stroll once again down that dear old lover's lane where nature seems to softly croon. Our hearts will be so light as we wander there tonight underneath the Mississippi moon. Many years have come and gone since I met you there alone, but tonight I'm thinking just as much of you as I did when hand in hand we wandered in that magic land where we gave our pledge to love each other true. Come and go back with me to that spot in memory just to see again that Mississippi moon. Oh, the Mississippi moon is shining down tonight and love just seems to fill the air. The whippoors are flitting in its mellow light and calling to the lovers there. Let us stroll once again down that dear old lover's lane where nature seems to softly croon. Our hearts will be so light as we wander there tonight underneath the Mississippi moon. The most enduring influence that the Carter family and Jimmie Rodgers have had on contemporary music, however, lies in something that they didn't actually do. In fact, something that they, or rather Ralph Peer, actually lied about doing. Now, Peer was not an artist. He was a businessman. He understood the music business better than almost anybody else in those early days, and he realized that there were not two components to a successful song, but three. Now, obviously, record companies focused on record sales, and singers focused both on record sales and on fees for live performances. But there was a third component, the copyright in the song, and that usually went to the songwriter, which meant that if the song was later published as sheet music or was covered by other artists in live performances, on records, on the radio, on stage, later on in movies or television, the original singer and the original record company received nothing. Now, Peer did not see why this should be the case. He wanted to have a finger in all three pies. These musicians who signed with him at Bristol and elsewhere actually signed two separate contracts, one with Peer as a representative of the Victor Talking Machine Company, and the other with Peer's own company, Southern Music Publishing, which published sheet music, managed copyrights, and for a while also ran a bookings agency for its artists. The company is still around today, still a major player in the popular music business. Today it is called Peer Music and is run by Peer's son, Ralph Peer II. Now, for this model to work, Peer needed original songs, not cover versions of previously copyrighted material. So he pushed both Jimmie Rodgers and A.P. Carter to come up with songs which he could call original, which in most cases usually meant tweaked versions of previously existing songs, even often previously recorded ones. Now, sometimes the tweaks amounted to substantial revisions, other times to minor changes. Didn't matter. Either way, Peer copyrighted them all, and he and his artists laughed all the way to the bank. Now, this might sound exploitative, but I should emphasize that Peer paid his artists a higher rate than was the industry standard at the time, and his accounting was strictly accurate. The history of popular music is an endless saga of lawsuits pitting naive musicians against their managers, their publishers, and their record labels. Now, Peer was all three, but he never had a major conflict with any of his artists. To this day, the heirs of Jimmie Rodgers and of the Carter family are still represented by Peer Music. Now, the impact of this on subsequent generations can hardly be overstated. Prior to the Bristol sessions, there had basically never been such a thing as a singer-songwriter. Irving Berlin, Cole Porter, George and Ira Gershwin did not sing the songs they wrote, any more than Stephen Foster or Gilbert and Sullivan had. Al Jolson, Eddie Cantor, and Rudy Vallee didn't write the songs they sang, any more than Jenny Lind or Enrico Caruso had. George M. Cohan did do both, but he was regarded as a freak of nature. All the same, the success of Jimmie Rodgers and the Carter Family had a tremendous inspiration to a generation of country boys and later country girls who dreamed of emulating them. And when they looked at the records, they saw that the songs were written by the same people that sang them. From there, it was only a short distance to imagining that the singers were writing about their own lives and feelings, that the listener was getting the authentic story straight from the heart as the story went. Now, this was not actually what was happening, but the listeners didn't know any better. And so when they decided that they wanted to be just like Jimmie Rodgers or just like the Carter Family, Hank Williams, Hank Snow, Ernest Tubb, Loretta Lynn, they all began by writing songs about their own lives and feelings. And some of those songs were pretty good and caught on, and those people became stars themselves. And pretty soon the ideal of country music was the sincere, straight from the heart singer-songwriter. Now, by the time rock and roll split off from country in the 1950s, this tradition was already firmly established. And so the early rock stars, people like Chuck Berry, Buddy Holly, Carl Perkins, wrote their own greatest hits because they had grown up listening to country music, and that was what country stars did. In turn, their fans sat down and started to write. It is only a mild exaggeration to say that if it weren't for Ralph Peer and the Bristol Sessions, it's quite possible that John Lennon, Paul McCartney, Paul Simon, Brian Wilson, even Bob Dylan might never have written a word or a note of music. So, the Carter Family may not have written the songs they sang, but the songs that they recorded generally resonated with the lives they lived, and that came through on their recordings. This one was the biggest hit from the Bristol Sessions. It was adapted by A.P. Carter from an old folk song. Sarah Carter did not want to sing it, saying that she did not understand it. Personally, I think she understood it all too well. By this point, Sarah and A.P. had been married for 12 years with 3 children, and the marriage was, at least from Sarah's point of view, an unhappy one, with A.P. an eccentric and often absent husband who seemed to her to be more interested in her as a singer than as a wife. Be that as it may, when the song was recorded at Bristol, it was recorded only by Sarah and Maybelle, with A.P. conspicuous for his absence. Single girl, go and dress so fine. Go and dress so fine. Married girl, wears most any kind. Wears most any kind. Single girl, going where she please, going where she please. Married girl, baby on her knees, baby on her knees. Single girl, goes to the store and buys, goes to the store and buys. Married girl, rocks the cradle and cries, rocks the cradle and cries. Now, Jimmie Rodgers did write occasional autobiographical songs. The notable one is called Jimmy the Kid. It's a song about his happy marriage, which name checks his wife Carrie and their daughter Anita. He wrote it for a pressing reason. He had done a series of My Gal Done Me Wrong songs, and it turned out they were so successful that his wife was getting harassed by angry fans whenever she left the house. So he wrote the song to kind of tell them to back off. Only once, however, did he really plumb the depths of his soul for a song, and that would be this one. My good gal's trying to make a fool of me. My good gal's trying to make a fool of me. Trying to make me believe that I ain't got that old TB. I got the TB blues. When it rained down sorrows, it rained all over me. When it rained down sorrows, it rained all over me. 'Cause my body rattles like a train on the old SP. I got the TB blues. I got TB and I can't eat a bite. Got that old TB and I just can't eat a bite. Got me worried so that I can't even sleep at night. I got the TB blues. I've been fighting like a lion, but it looks like I'm going to lose. Been fighting like a lion, but it looks like I'm going to lose. 'Cause there ain't nobody ever with them TB blues. I got the TB blues. Gee, but the graveyard is a lonesome place. Lord, but the graveyard is a lonesome place. They lay you on your back, throw that mud down on your face. I got the TB blues. Rodgers and co-writer Ray Hall were not making that one up. Rodgers had been diagnosed with tuberculosis years before he ever made it to Bristol, and as his stardom waxed, his health waned. That song is from 1931, and 2 years later, Rodgers was dead, collapsing on a New York City sidewalk after taking a break from recording sessions for a visit to Coney Island. He was only 35 years old. Well, we are coming up on what is usually a 10-minute intermission. Under the circumstances, I think it will be, at least for you guys, only about 10 seconds. After which we will come back and talk about the influence of Jimmie Rodgers on the Carter family on such later artists as Roy Acuff, Hank Snow, Johnny Cash, Hank Thompson, Chris Christopherson, and Carl Perkins. However, we do have a little bit of time before we have to take that break, and I want to use that to acknowledge the fact that while the Carter family and Jimmy Rogers were the breakthrough stars of the Bristol sessions, they were not the only talented musicians there. There were 17 other acts that recorded for Peer's microphones in that 2-week period, including such noted names as the West Virginia Coon Hunters, Ernest Phipps's Holiness Quintet, and the Blue Ridge Corn Shuckers, and many of them were terrific. Now, I can't give you a reasonable representation of the ones who were instrumentalists. There were a number of extremely talented guitar players and fiddlers at Bristol for that couple of weeks. Nor can I accurately represent the ones whose music was based on close harmonies, like the Stoneman family, who arrived at Bristol as the biggest stars there. However, there were a number who worked basically as solo singers, and I can give them their moment of glory, such as blind Alfred Reed, who wrote and recorded The Wreck of the Virginian. Train wreck songs were big in this era, and this particular one was about something that had happened not far from Bristol only a couple of months before. Come, oh, you brave, bold railroad men, and listen while I tell the fate of E.G. Aldrich, a good man we all loved well. This man was running on a road known as Virginian Line. He was a faithful engineer and pulled his train on time. He was the oldest on the line, we always called him Dad. He loved his engine very much, he was the best we had. Frank O'Neill was his fireman, he was faithful, true, and brave. He stayed with Dad, he died with Dad, and filled a new-made grave. It was a bright spring morning on the 24th of May. The train crew was at Roanoke, they were feeling fine and gay. Train number 3 left Roanoke en route to Huntington. Those poor men didn't know that they were making their last run. Dad pulled his train, a pleasing smile on his bright face did gleam. He did not have to grumble, Frank sure gave him lots of steam. At 11:52 that day, they just left Ingleside. An eastbound freight crushed into them, they took their final ride. It seems that a good engineer to duty always sticks. Dad entered into service in the year 1906. He did not have to work to live, they begged him to retire. But Dad would not give his consent, to run was his desire. Dear ladies, if your husband runs an engine on the line, you may expect a message of his death most any time. All railroad men should live for God and always faithful be. Like Dad and Frank, they soon may pass into eternity. One other thing about our upcoming intermission, normally I would encourage you to fill out the mailing list forms in your programs so that you can be notified of upcoming Tennessee Walt shows. That's not really feasible in this remote version, so instead I'm going to suggest that you drop an email to 10walt@gmail.com We will put you on our email list, and you will hear all about upcoming Walt shows, both in the real world and online. Anyway, one more song before our 10-second intermission. More than half of the songs that were recorded at Bristol were religious in nature. Now, Ralph Peer didn't mind a little religion around the edges. He certainly didn't object to the Carter family, who frequently went that way. But he shied away from artists who were exclusively religious. He wanted to sell records to Jews, to Catholics, to atheists, to anybody who had a buck. So he avoided artists who were strictly sectarian. And that is too bad, because Alfred G. Carnes had a big voice that could easily have made him a star. Peer was obviously tempted. He recorded 4 songs by Carnes. The problem was, Carnes was a Baptist minister and seemed unlikely to venture into the kind of repertoire that Peer thought would be helpful to Victor's bottom line. Nonetheless, this one became a classic. It has since been covered by everyone from Johnny Cash and Hank Williams to the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. You can even hear it prominently on the soundtrack of the 1962 movie How the West Was Won. Personally, though it had been tackled by many people, the words were by Samuel Stennett in 1785, the music by a Miss Durham in 1835. Of them all, the version I prefer is, surprise, Alfred G. Carnes's. On Jordan's stormy and cast a wishful eye, on Canaan's fair and happy land, where my possessions lie. I'm bound for the promised land. I'm bound for the promised land. Oh, who will come and go with me? I'm bound for the promised land. O'er all the wide extended plains shines one eternal day, where God the Son forever reigns and scatters night away. I'm bound for the promised land. I'm bound for the promised land. Oh, who will come and go with me? I'm bound for the promised land. No chilling wind, no poisonous breath can reset healthful shore. Sickness and sorrow, pain and death are felt and feared no more. I'm bound for the promised land. I'm bound for the promised land. Oh, who will come and go with me? I'm bound for the promised land. When shall I reach that heavenly place and be forever blessed? When shall I see my Father's face and in his bosom rest? I'm bound for the promised land. I'm bound for the promised land. Oh, who will come and go with me? I'm bound for the promised land. Filled with delight, my raptured soul would here no longer stay. Though Jordan's waves about me roll, fearless I'd launch away. I'm bound for the promised land. I'm bound for the promised land. Oh, who will come and go with me? I'm bound for the promised land. See you in 10 seconds, folks. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the song that destroyed the Carter family. Twould been better for us both had we never in this wide and wicked world ever met. But the pleasure we both seem to gather, I'm sure, dear, I'll never forget. I'm thinking tonight of my blue eyes, who's sailing far over the sea. Yes, I'm thinking tonight of my blue eyes, and I wonder if he ever thinks of me. You told me once, dear, that you loved me. You vowed that we two would never part. But a link in the chain has been broken, leaving me with a sad and aching heart. I'm thinking tonight of my blue eyes, who's sailing far over the sea. Yes, I'm thinking tonight of my blue eyes, and I wonder if he ever thinks of me. When the cold, cold grave shall enclose me, will you come near and shed just one tear? Will you say to the strangers around you, a true heart that you have broken lieth here? I'm thinking tonight of my blue eyes, who's sailing far over the sea. Yes, I'm thinking tonight of my blue eyes, and I wonder if he ever thinks of me. Yes, I wonder if he ever thinks of me. Well, that doesn't sound all that destructive, does it? Nonetheless, that's the one that did it. I mentioned earlier that the marriage of A.P. and Sarah Carter was not an ideal one. A.P. would disappear for days on end, walking through the mountains collecting songs, often accompanied by his friend Leslie Riddle. And even when he was home, he wasn't usually either talkative or affectionate. In 1932, Sarah began an affair with A.P.'s young cousin, Coy Bays, an affair which ended in 1933 when his family found out about it, and they sent him off to California, and that was the end of the affair. Sarah did the best she could to put her marriage back together again, but the problems remained, and in 1936 she filed for divorce. The breakup of the marriage did not become public knowledge, however, and the Carters continued to perform as a trio, first in Virginia and then in Texas, to which they relocated in 1938 for 6 months a year to perform on the high-powered XERA, a radio station located just across the border into Mexico. Sarah remained unhappy, however, and in early February of 1939 she took matters into her own hands, seizing the microphone, which she almost never did, and announcing that she wanted to dedicate the next song, quote, to Coy Bays, wherever he may be. She then launched into I'm thinking tonight of my blue eyes. Now, Coy was still in California, but though it had been 6 years since he had seen Sarah Carter, he still made a point of listening to the show every night on XERA, so he heard her song. According to his sister, he turned to their mother and said, "Ma, I'm going to go get Sarah." To which his mother replied, "Well, Coy, I guess you better go get her." So he drove 1,200 miles to Del Rio, Texas, and they were married on February 20th. When the Carters finished their season in Texas, A.P.'s Maybelle and her children returned to Virginia while Coy and Sarah went home to California. The Carters tried to keep the act together, but Sarah was increasingly unwilling to spend half of each year in Texas with her ex-husband. By the early 1940s, the act was dead, and despite occasional reunion efforts, it stayed that way. Its influence, however, continued to grow, primarily through the existence of a new act headlined by Maybelle Carter and her 3 daughters, Helen, June, and Anita, performing as Mother Maybelle and the Carter sisters, but also in the ongoing influence of their music itself. Among other things, the Carters' 15 years of recordings constituted a treasury of tunes which would be appropriated by songwriters for generations to come. For instance, their 1930 hit When the World's on Fire was a favorite of an 18-year-old growing up in Oklahoma. Oh, loving mother, when the world's on fire, don't you want God's bosom to be your pillow? Tide you over in the rock of ages cleft for me. I'm going to heaven when the world's on fire, and I want God's bosom to be my pillow. Tide me over in the rock of ages cleft for me. Oh, brothers and sisters, don't you want to go to heaven? Don't you want God's bosom to be your pillow? Tide you over in the rock of ages cleft for me. Oh, all you sinners, when the world's on fire, don't you want God's bosom to be your pillow? Tide you over in the rock of ages cleft for me. Rock of ages cleft for me. Appropriating tunes did not begin with Woody Guthrie, of course. Especially in the early years, country songwriters often helped themselves to the tunes of existing songs, often on the assumption that the previous songwriter had himself lifted the tune from some earlier yet song. Hank Williams wrote many of his greatest hits to existing tunes, and Johnny Cash's Folsom Prison Blues was the subject of a high-profile plagiarism suit in the early 1970s. Jimmy Rogers' successor at the top of the country heap was Roy Acuff, who became known as the King of Country Music. Acuff had been born in 1903 in Maynardsville, Tennessee, and had started out fronting a swing band called the Crazy Tennesseans. In 1836, however, he threw a country song onto the B-side of one of his records and scored his biggest hit to date. Acuff was no fool, so he changed the name of his band to the Smoky Mountain Boys and began singing exclusively country. And it paid off. In 1952, Hank Williams told an interviewer, "He's the biggest singer this music ever had. You booked him and you didn't worry about crowds. For drawing power in the South, it was Roy Acuff, then God." Acuff was almost as big as Jimmy Rogers. He even ran for governor of Tennessee on the Republican ticket in 1945, and he got to enjoy it for a lot longer. He lived to be 89, dying in 1992, and sang on the Grand Ole Opry right up until the end. In 1991, he was awarded the Presidential Medal of the Arts and became the first country star to be feted at the Kennedy Center Honors. Oh, and the song that convinced him to switch from swing to country. Well, it was a bizarre hymn with words by the Reverend Guy Smith. The tune, well, that wasn't by Smith. What a beautiful thought I am thinking concerning a great speckled bird. Remember, her name is recorded in the pages of God's holy word. With all the other birds flocking round her, she is so despised by the squad. The great speckled bird is the Bible, representing the great church of God. desiring to lower her standards. They watch every move that she makes. They long to find fault with her teachings, but really they find no mistakes. I am glad I have learned of her meekness. I'm proud that my name is in her book, for I want to be one never fearing on the face of my Savior to look, when he cometh descending from heaven on a cloud as he writes in his word. I'll be joyfully carried to meet him on the wings of a great speckled bird. Acuff's biggest hit came with another song whose tune had originally been rendered by the Carter family. This one had been written way back in 1882 as the Great Rock Island Route by a songwriter named J.A. Roth, and had been put into more or less its current form in 1904 by William Kint. The Carters recorded it in 1929 and did well with it, but Acuff did even better. There are fewer than 40 songs in the history of popular music, 40 songs in any genre, to have sold more than 10 million copies. This is one of them. From the great Atlantic Ocean to the wide Pacific shore, from the loved ones left behind us to the ones we see once more. She's mighty tall and handsome and known quite well by all. She's a modern combination called the Wabash Cannonball. Listen to the jingle, the rumble, and the roar as she glides across the woodlands on her way from shore to shore. Hear the mighty roar of the engine, hear the lonesome hobo squall. You're riding through the jungles on the Wabash Cannonball. Oh, the eastern states are dandies, so the eastern people say, from New York to St. Louis and Chicago by the way. To the hills of Minnesota where the rippling waters fall, no changes to be taken on the Wabash Cannonball. Listen to the jingle, the rumble, and the roar as she glides across the woodlands on her way from shore to shore. Hear the mighty roar of the engine, hear the lonesome hobo squall. You're riding through the jungles on the Wabash Cannonball. So here's to old Sea Gaydon, may his name forever stand, and always be remembered in the courts throughout the land. His earthly race is over, and the curtains round him fall. We'll carry him home to victory on the Wabash Cannonball. Listen to the jingle, the rumble, and the roar as she glides across the woodlands on her way from shore to shore. Hear the mighty roar of the engine, hear the lonesome hobo squall. You're riding through the jungles on the Wabash Cannonball. Oh, I've rode the IC Limited, also the Royal Blue, and crossed the eastern country on Elkhorn number 2. I've rode those highball trains from coast to coast and all, but I have found no equal to the Wabash Cannonball. Listen to the jingle, the rumble, and the roar as she glides across the woodlands on her way from shore to shore. Hear the mighty roar of the engine, hear the lonesome hobo squall. You're riding through the jungles on the Wabash Cannonball. Oh, she came down from Birmingham one cold December day. As she walked through the station, you could hear all the people say, there's a girl from Tennessee, she's long and she's tall. She came down from Birmingham on the Wabash Cannonball. Listen to the jingle, the rumble, and the roar as she glides across the woodlands on her way from shore to shore. Hear the mighty roar of the engine, hear the lonesome hobo squall. You're riding through the jungles on the Wabash Cannonball. You're riding through the jungles on the Wabash Cannonball. Train songs were big in Bristol and remained big in country music into the 1960s until the decline of the railroads finally took them off the table. The great Hank Snow, who was the first Canadian inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame, owed his career to a train song, which became his first big hit. It probably figured that Snow would have an affinity for train songs because his idol was Jimmie Rodgers, also known as the Singing Brakeman. Snow and another Rodgers aficionado and Country Music Hall of Fame member Ernest Tubb were the moving forces behind the establishment of the Jimmie Rodgers Memorial Music Festival, which was launched in the 1950s and continues to be held each May in Meridian, Mississippi. Tubb and Snow had another thing in common, actually. They both named their eldest son after Jimmie Rodgers. That would be Rogers Dale Tubb and Jimmie Rodgers Snow. The song that made Hank Snow famous was one that he had written himself and released in 1950. At the time, it tied an all-time record for the longest stay at number one on the country charts. It would be 63 years before this record was broken. That big eight-wheeler rolling down the track means your true loving daddy ain't coming back. I'm moving on, I'll soon be gone. You were flying too high for my little old sky, now I'm moving on. That big loud whistle and the blue and blues and the load of the Southland, we're coming to you and we're moving on. Oh, hear my song. You had to laugh on me, now I'm setting you free and I'm moving on. Mr. Fireman, won't you please listen to me, 'cause I got a pretty mama in Tennessee. Keep moving me on, keep rolling on. So shovel the coal, let us rattle or roll, keep moving me on. Mr. Engineer, take that throttle in hand. This rattler's the fastest in the southern land. Keep moving me on, keep rolling on. So you gotta ease my mind, get me there on time. Keep rolling on. I warned you, baby, from time to time, but you just wouldn't listen or pay me no mind. So I'm moving on, I'm rolling on. You've broken your vows, so it's all over now, and I'm moving on. You switched your engine, now I ain't got time for no trifling woman on my main line, so I'm moving on. You done your daddy wrong. I warned you twice, I can settle the price, 'cause I'm moving on. But someday, baby, when you've had your play, you're gonna want your daddy, but your daddy gonna say, keep moving on. You've been away too long. I'm through with you, too bad you're blue. But I'm moving on. And as we move on, we'll move on to Johnny Cash, who, of course, became famous with a train song of his own, Folsom Prison Blues. Now, Cash once described the Bristol sessions as the single most important event in the history of country music. And that shouldn't be too surprising because there were few, if any, people who were not themselves at Bristol to whom these sessions were so great an influence. Now, you probably know that Cash married Maybelle Carter's middle daughter, June. And you may know that Mother Maybelle and the Carter sisters toured with Johnny Cash's touring show for more than a decade. You may not know, though, that Johnny Cash was, from childhood, an obsessive fan of Jimmie Rodgers. He sought out Rodgers' widow, Carrie, and became a friend of the family. He moved to California for several years to pursue a Jimmie Rodgers biopic in which he wanted to star. And when he made his first concert appearance at Carnegie Hall in 1962, he came out dressed as Jimmie Rodgers and sang nothing but Rodgers songs for the entire first set. Which was a big disappointment to a capacity crowd, which most of whom were too young to remember Rodgers, who had died 30 years before, and had come hoping to hear Johnny Cash songs. It was also very frustrating to the good people from Columbia Records because they were trying to record a live album and had to give up the project underneath a barrage of boos. Cash never got his chance to play Jimmie Rodgers on the big screen. He did, however, cover more than a dozen Rodgers songs on his own records, and brought the spirit of his hero to almost all of his recordings, including notably Folsom Prison Blues. I hear the train a-comin', it's rolling round the bend, but I ain't seen the sunshine since I don't know when. I'm stuck in Folsom Prison, and time keeps dragging on, but that train keeps a-rolling on down to San Antonio. When I was just a baby, my mama told me, son, always be a good boy, don't ever play with guns. But I shot a man in Reno just to watch him die. When I hear that whistle blowing, I hang my head and cry. I bet there's rich folk eating in a fancy dining car. They're probably drinking coffee and smoking big cigars. Well, I know I had it coming, I know I can't be free, but them people keep a-moving, and that's what tortures me. If they freed me from this prison, if that railroad train was mine, I bet I'd move it on a little farther down the line, far from Folsom Prison. That's where I'd wanna stay, and I'd let that lonesome whistle my blues away. Jimmie Rodgers became known as the father of country music, and in 1961 became one of the first 3 inductees into the Country Music Hall of Fame, alongside Hank Williams and songwriter, producer, publisher Fred Rose. The influence of the Carter family, while pervasive, was not nearly as much so as that of Jimmie Rodgers. And part of this is because the act happened to be fronted by a woman. And until the mid-1950s, women weren't really allowed to sing country music. Now, the reasons for this are complicated, but basically they have to do with the fact that country itself was seen as disreputable. It was most often heard in honky-tonks, smoke-filled dives packed with reckless men and shady women, and the general consensus was that it was no field for a respectable woman. Now, there were family acts that included women, as the Carter family had, and a woman could be a vocalist for a big band or orchestra that might occasionally sing a country song. Mostly, though, women were not allowed to sing country music. And that is hard to believe today because so many of the big names in country today are women. Where would contemporary country be without Faith Hill, Miranda Lambert, Leanne Rimes, Taylor Swift, Shania Twain, Carrie Underwood? And that's only the young ones. I'm not even talking about veteran acts like Dolly Parton and Loretta Lynn and Tanya Tucker and Reba McEntire and Emmylou Harris. Well, you get my point. But all of those women owe their careers to one woman and to one song. The song was It Wasn't God Who Made Honky Tonk Angels, and a woman was Kitty Wells, and she owed her career to one man and to one song. That man was Hank Thompson, who in 1952 had a #1 hit with a song about a man who's married a woman he met at a honky-tonk and has lived to regret it. You wouldn't read my letter if I wrote you. You asked me not to call you on the phone. But there's something I'm wanting to tell you, so I wrote it in the words of this song. I didn't know God made honky-tonk angels. I might have known you'd never make a wife. You gave up the only one that ever loved you and went back to the wild side of life. The glamour of the gay nightlife has lured you to the places where the wine and liquor flow, where you wait to be anybody's baby and forget the truest love you'll ever know. I didn't know God made honky-tonk angels. I might have known you'd never make a wife. You gave up the only one that ever loved you and went back to the wild side of life. Yes, it hurts me to know that you don't love me, though I know that our love's forever gone. And it killed the soul and pride dear inside me to see you in that stranger's arms so long. I didn't know God made honky-tonk angels. I might have known you'd never make a wife. You gave up the only one that ever loved you and went back to the wild side of life. And went back to the wild side of life. That tune may have sounded a little familiar. It is indeed the same one from I'm Thinking Tonight of My Blue Eyes and also The Great Speckled Bird. However, it lingers on in history as the only tune ever to have two different country songs in the same year that hit #1 on the Billboard charts. You see, a songwriter named Jay Miller wrote an answer song to The Wild Side of Life, writing in the voice of an actual honky-tonk angel, arguing that the original song was a sexist travesty, that the only thing wrong with honky-tonks was the kind of men you met there. Now, because there were no female country stars at that time, he had to turn to an unknown to record it for him. Kitty Wells, who was an occasional backup singer for her husband, Johnny Wright, of the country duo Johnny and Jack. She recorded the song, and to everybody's astonishment, it became a #1 sensation, ousting The Wild Side of Life as #1 on the charts, and launching a career of the first of the great country female solo artists, Kitty Wells, soon to be known as the Queen of Country Music. And here to render it for you is my own personal Queen of Country Music, Texas Sally, better known to the rest of the world as Sarah Holiday.
Tonight the jukebox playing your song about the wild side of life. As I listen to the words you are saying, it brings memories when I was a trustful wife. It wasn't God who made honky-tonk angels, as you said in the words of your song. Times married men think they're still single. That's caused many a good girl to go wrong. It's a shame that all the blame is on us women. It's not true that only you men feel the same. From the start, most every heart that's ever broken was because there always was a man to blame. It wasn't God who made honky-tonk angels, as you said in the words of your song. Too many times married men think they're still single. That's caused many a good girl to go wrong. It wasn't God who made honky-tonk angels, as you said in the words of your
you. Well, we are running a little short on time, but it would not be right to wrap up without taking the opportunity to say a few words about the 1970s and 1980s movement known as outlaw country. Now, to people outside the country world, outlaw, whose biggest stars included people like Johnny Cash, Merle Haggard, Waylon Jennings, Chris Christopherson, Willie Nelson, well, outlaw looked like country's version of the counterculture. Outlaw artists dressed like rock stars, wearing blue jeans, beards, and long hair. They messed around with drugs instead of with booze like proper country stars. And they wrote controversial songs about issues of the day, usually from a liberal point of view. Musically, however, the Outlaws were not the counterculture, but rather a conservative backlash against the popified country of the 1960s and 1970s, the style known as the Nashville Sound. The Outlaws wanted to get back to country's roots, to songs and singers, in a word, back to Bristol. They wore long hair and blue jeans because, well, as opposed to the rhinestone cowboy outfits sported by the mainstream country stars of the era, because that was what the people of their own age were wearing, in the same way that Jimmy Rogers and the Carter family had performed wearing everyday street clothes. As to the songs they sang, the Outlaws looked back to the classics. The album that launched the outlaw movement was Nelson's breakthrough album of 1975, Red-Headed Stranger, and its lead single was Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain, a song that had been written by Fred Rose for Roy Acuff in 1947 and had been covered by Hank Williams in 1951. Merle Haggard had earlier in 1969 put out a double album called Same Train, A Different Time, which consisted entirely of Jimmy Rogers covers. And Haggard and Nelson would later team for a Jimmy Rogers tribute song called Django and Jimmy. The Outlaws also wrote their own songs about their own lives and feelings, which they recorded with stripped-down bands that featured steel guitars, fiddles, harmonicas, the kind of classic country instruments which had largely been phased out by the Nashville Sound. Jimmy Rogers would have had no trouble understanding or even singing songs like Christopherson's Me and Bobby McGee, or Nelson's On the Road Again, or Haggard's Today I Started Loving You Again, or Jennings's This Time. As to their politics, that too is a throwback. Most of the great classic country stars had been Roosevelt liberals. Nor was the Carter legacy neglected. The Nashville Sound had pretty much eased out the religious and the folk elements from country music, but the Outlaws put them back in. Most notably Christopherson, who in 1972 wrote and recorded what many people consider to be the greatest religious song ever written, country or otherwise. Why me, Lord? What have I ever done to deserve even one of the pleasures I've known? Tell me, Lord, what did I ever do that was worth loving you, or the kindness you've shown? Lord, help me, Jesus, I've wasted it, so help me, Jesus, I know what I am. Now that I know how I've needed you, so help me, Jesus, my soul's in your hand. Try me, Lord, if you think there's a way I can ever repay all I've taken from you. Maybe, Lord, I could show someone else what I've been through myself on my way back to you. Lord, help me, Jesus, I've wasted it so. Help me, Jesus, I know what I am. Now that I know how I've needed you so, help me, Jesus, my soul's in your hand. Jesus, my soul's in your hand. Well, we are about out of time, so I'd like to thank you for coming out today, or in this case, staying in today to hear some country in the suburbs. I'd like to encourage you, as I said before, to send an email to 10walt@gmail.com. That will enable us to put you on our email list. Or you can follow us on facebook.com/TennesseeWalt. Or you can visit our website, TennesseeWalt.com, where there's a tour page. Any of these will allow you to be up to date on upcoming Tennessee Walt shows, both on the internet and in the real world. I've enjoyed seeing you all today, or at least having you see me, and I would love to do it again sometime. We have just a couple minutes left, so I'd like to talk for a moment about what is maybe the most enduring aspect of the Bristol sessions. Now, country music cannot really be said to have spanned the globe. It is popular in Australia and in Canada and in northern England, but basically it is an American form. The same cannot be said for country's most famous offspring, rock and roll. Now, for the younger people in our audience, rock and roll emerged in the 1950s as the love child of country and rhythm and blues. Its first big names, people like Chuck Berry, Buddy Holly, Johnny Cash, Jerry Lee Lewis, Carl Perkins, and of course Elvis Presley, were all country boys who had grown up listening to the Grand Ole Opry and dreaming of performing there someday, which they all did eventually. Their music combined the soul of country with the driving beat of rhythm and blues to produce a new genre which became known fairly soon as rockabilly. Now, by the late 1960s, rock and roll had gone in a lot of different directions, and Holly was dead, and Cash, Lewis, Perkins, and even Presley had pretty much made their way back to country. However, country's influence on rock can still be seen in such later acts as the Allman Brothers Band, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, Charlie Daniels, the Grateful Dead, or Lynyrd Skynyrd, my personal favorite band name of all time, possibly. It's no coincidence that there are 11 different people who are members of both the Country Music Hall of Fame and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, including Cash, Hank Williams, Presley, and yes, Jimmy Rogers. Carl Perkins was born in Tiptonville, Tennessee in 1932. All these guys seem to have come from very small towns. He may have risen to fame as a rocker, but he knew where his roots lay. He spent the 1960s working as the lead guitarist in Johnny Cash's band with his touring program, working alongside Cash and also Mother Maybelle and the Carter sisters. And this was deeply moving to Perkins, a longtime Carter family fan. From his point of view, if there had never been a Carter family, there might never have been a Carl Perkins. And Paul McCartney once said, quote, "If there weren't a Carl Perkins, there would have been no Beatles." Perkins died in 1992, and the attendees at his funeral ranged from rock royalty to rockabilly royalty to country royalty alike, as well as obviously thousands of fans. The people there included George Harrison, Jerry Lee Lewis, Garth Brooks, Johnny Cash, and Winona Judd. His biggest hit, of course, was Blue Suede Shoes, but I would like to wrap up the show today with his second biggest hit. I remember when I was a lad, times were hard and things were bad, but there's a silver lining to every cloud. Just four people, that's all we were, trying to make a living off of black land dirt. We'd get joined together in a family circle, singing loud. Daddy sang bass, Mama sang tenor, me and little brother would join right in there. Singing seems to help a troubled soul. One of these days, and it won't be long, I'll rejoin them in a song. Gonna join the family circle at the throne. No, the circle won't be broken. By and by, Lord, by and by. Dad'll sing bass, Mama'll sing tenor, me and little brother will join right in there. In the sky, Lord, in the sky. I remember after work, Mama would call in all of us. You could hear us singing for a country mile. Now little brother is done gone on, but I'll rejoin him in a song. We'll be together way up yonder in a little while. Dad'll sing bass, Mama'll sing tenor, me and little brother will join right in there. Singing seems to help a troubled soul. One of these days, and it won't be long, I'll rejoin them in a song. Gonna join the family circle at the throne. No, the circle won't be broken. By and by, Lord, by and by. Dad'll sing bass, Mama'll sing tenor, me and little brother will join right in there. In the sky, Lord, in the sky. In the sky, Lord, in the sky. Thanks for coming, everybody. Take care of yourselves.